Hello, everyone. Welcome to Make It Big 2021. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm Caroline Lim, Head of Channel Growth Marketing here at BigCommerce. I'm so excited to be here with Keith Karlick, Director of Strategy of Overdose. Keith, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I'd love for you to share how you got started in e-commerce and ultimately what led to founding Mercutio and then most recently joining Overdose.
Yeah, so seems like a lifetime ago. I was asked at my current company to move as a graphic designer into managing a web build, and at that point we built our first site on Magento 1, and it was all on-prem infrastructure, all of that. And then you did that for a number of years and moved into my first agency at Hammerquist Studios. That went through an acquisition and then joined Mercutio 5 years ago as a partner, and that's when Jimmy Fersman and myself decided to strike out on our own and and build our own thing. The interesting thing there is that Jimmy and I both come from a Magento background, and then about 3 years ago, just made the intentional decision to select BigCommerce as our primary e-commerce partner.
Well, that's so exciting for Mercutio joining the Overdose family, and I'm sure there are so many great things to come. Let's get started with our session, shall we?
Yep.
So, Keith, across all of your clients, you're very focused on helping brands drive their e-commerce business to provide a best-in-class online experience to your customers. What are the key foundational areas you and your team focus on?
We've always been a strategically led business, and coming from the merchant side a long time ago and working with on the agency side for well over a decade. I think that whether it's brand or e-commerce or what have you, having a clearly defined strategy is really the kind of the needed foundation to execute against. And so we apply that heavily to all of our projects on e-commerce. Where we start is really understanding what the merchants need or what our clients need from an e-commerce standpoint, and then applying really strong design practice as well as engineering to it. So I like to say that the strategy side is what what leads the project, but the engineering piece is what makes everything go.
Yeah, creating the strategy that supports all those different foundational pieces really can be overwhelming, right? So, if we can focus on three different areas: technology, creative, and strategy, really, how does all that impact? And beginning with technology, how do you evaluate a client's current tech stack? Any technological aspects that are essential to creating a leading customer experience?
Yeah, I think that there's really kind of two components here. Is the first one with cloud services have come such a long way in recent years that SaaS e-commerce is really a place where clients can release themselves from having to manage security updates and patching and things like that, while also having the freedom to build customer experiences as needed. And then along with that, we're in a place where so many services have really strong APIs that it's a lot easier to implement integrations for best in class services across the board, whether that's shipping and fulfillment through headless, through CRM, through really kind of anything that's needed. So that concept of or I should say that we're entering, I think, the golden age of composable architecture, because of how some of these technologies are coming along very quickly.
When looking at technology, what features are the most worthy for B2B websites from B2C?
Yeah, so I think that this is where you start to see things stray a little bit. Is B2C is all about the speed to purchase. That's oftentimes like a key measurement. Is how much time does it take to get a customer through the site into checkout. With B2B, you already have a captured audience. So, they're going to be there, often and, regularly. So I think that really it is about, getting out of the way and giving the information that they need, or, as quickly as possible. So thinking about having robust search, so maybe it's by SKU or part number or other things where a B2B shopper is going to need, I need this thing and it has a SKU of X and I want it added to my cart right now. We do a lot of quick ordering where you might be able to do a quick search and add multiple items to cart in one button on one page. So instead of having to go to 10 different PDP pages, you're able to go to one and then add it all there. Combined order history, where if you think about a brand that has offline ordering, maybe through a Salesforce or through a customer service team, the online or the web experience needs to be able to show online and offline orders in that single screen for a proper account history, as well as being able to pivot information around invoices, POs, multiple orders, multiple shipments, things like that. And then there are some B2C things that play, is that customers still shop on mobile, performance is king, and and driving understanding around your product through content, how-to information, specifications, things like that continues to be important.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about creative a little bit. We all know how important it is to have a beautifully designed e-commerce store, especially when it comes down to your homepage, which is the first touch point, right, for new and existing customers. What advice do you have for both B2B and B2C businesses when it comes down to designing an eye-catching store?
There's really no excuse for ugly sites at this point. Front end technologies are to a place where we can implement anything that design teams can dream up. So I think that's kind of the important thing. There are some best practices for e-commerce that have been established by how many thousands of merchants out there that are selling with at very high scale, and those best practices for from a UX standpoint are really around wayfinding and helping customers kind of find their way through what sometimes can be a complicated selling process. So I think that I kind of think of it from two components. Is that the job of good user experience is to make it incredibly easy to perform the actions you need on the website. In e-commerce, that's typically buying something, while also in the world where shopping is becoming, much more of a commodity, that, brands really need to stand out and create engagement, create attraction with their customers. So, that idea of having a really strong, point of view or, brand perception on your website, is how you're going to, create that relationship with your customer.
Yeah, yeah. Just like marketing, right? Brand's very important.
None of these are new concepts. This stuff has been around for a very long time. We're just applying it to new technologies.
Right, right. So last but not least, strategy and analytics, which is, arguably the most important. What advice do you have for your clients when creating and setting UX, SEO, reporting, and creative goals?
Yeah, I conversion rate and AOV are always the things that folks point to. I think that conversion is the result of a lot of hard work. And so it's not always, it might be a metric that's indicative of, of business performance, but it is not necessarily the metric that is indicative of having, an effective website. Some of the metrics that I think are much more important, some of the metrics that are, I think that, easier to affect are going to be, time on site, add to cart rate, bounce rate, things like that. So, Google Analytics is a fine tool for reporting. There's many others out there that can do a good job at that. I think that the primary thing that folks should consider is, starting with that strategic foundation, setting KPIs that are meaningful to the business, and then, putting dashboarding in place where they can be tracking against it. So that way they're able to see, incremental change over time, which is how they're going to drive growth.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So we opened up with discussing the foundational blocks to a great customer experience. Now I want to dig a little deeper in B2B specifically. For the past few years, there's been so much buzz around just the word B2B, creating a B2C-like experience for B2B websites. Why do you think that is?
We finally entered the age where our B2B buyers are also e-commerce buyers or B2C buyers. It's one and the same at this point. I think that, maybe early in e-commerce, folks might consider, someone on the B2B side to maybe still thinking about manual ordering or order entry or having a sales rep or things like that. And a lot of that stuff still does exist for many, many companies out there. I think that, now that e-commerce is so entrenched into our daily lives that, we expect B2B shopping to be on a similar plane to what our B2B experiences are. And that's probably the largest gap.
Yeah. So, in your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges your B2B clients bring to the table? How do you solve them?
Yeah. So, I think there's kind of two different buckets that a lot of brands fall into. Is that, the first, you have, newer entrants into the world where there may be a digital first company and you're born and bred around B2C. Oftentimes those folks are trying to figure out how to sell in a B2B world. And maybe that's, pricing, maybe that's, fulfillment or, supply chain or things like that. And then you have another bucket where you have brands that have been around for a very long time, and that have sold, through sales forces or through, online, customer service teams or things like that, where it's been, manual order entry for a very long time. Those companies are oftentimes being asked to modernize because now you have buyers that actually want to be shopping online, and so they have to build those experiences. So it's not the same. I should say it's different strokes for different folks. And kind of figuring out where some of the challenges that are specific to the business are, I think, is where the win is. Companies that are, or I should say that one of the key things that might be different around B2B purchasing versus B2C is that, brands that have, legacy and large scale finance systems or ERP systems in place, their sales tooling or process is built around what that system can do, and oftentimes ERP systems are much more multifaceted than what e-commerce is. E-commerce is very simple. I have thing, I sell thing, I get money for thing, and that doesn't always apply to B2B, where you might have inventory based on a date or based on a delivery cycle or fulfillment if it's offshore manufacturing, how it lands in the US, things like that.
Yeah, you brought up a good point about different folks, different personas. Speaking of those challenges, there has been a rise in millennial B2B buyers, right? Which really does change the way we approach our e-commerce strategies as a whole. In fact, 60% of B2B tech buyers in 2021 are millennials. What do B2B brands need to know about the way millennial buyers shop online and how they can adapt those strategies to meet the expectations of persona?
Millennials start at 1980 in most cases, and so that puts a lot of those folks in their late 30s, early 40s. So they are now mid-career, and so when we think about a millennial B2B buyer, I don't really think about a 22-year-old person where this is their first job, first professional job at all. These folks have been doing this for a very long time. So I think that their expectations around technology are the same that they have in their personal lives, and that kind of goes back to the difference. There may not be as much of a difference between B2C and B2B other than some key functionality, but the expectation around experiences are largely the same because if you're born in 1980, or if you're born in 1980 to 85, like you've come through the large technology adoption, but at that point, everybody has a cell phone. They're all using Amazon. They're all, everybody's purchasing e-commerce in their daily life, and B2B would be no exception to that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do want to touch on marketing a little bit as a marketer, right? Aside from the e-commerce experience, what can a B2B brand really do to expand their reach via marketing?
In a lot of cases, B2B customers are someone that you already have a lot of information for. And so in a wholesale world, maybe they've applied through a credit app or they've done things where you've collected information about them. It's also maybe it's somebody that's doing reordering for consumable products, things like that. So I think that the opportunity for marketing with B2B is going to be around creating that highly personal, ongoing communication with that customer. So that way that you are, or as marketers, we are understanding what their needs are at that point in time. And a good example is if you think about someone that's purchasing, consumable products, there's going to be a repurchase cycle on there. And so understanding what that repurchase cycle is and then dropping an email or an SMS or, different tools that you can get in front of them about would be, one way that, someone can be in front of that customer at that point in time. So even still, this concept of personalization through marketing is very relevant on B2C as well. I think that, how B2B shoppers might be a little bit different in what they're looking for and, in the way that they're purchasing, but the tooling for marketing would be, I also think, similar to B2C.
Okay, to round out this portion of our discussion, we do talk a lot about B2B brands and what they can learn from B2C strategies. But let's flip that narrative real quick. What can B2Cs learn from B2Bs?
I think that B2Cs can pay attention to longer lead times or longer sales cycles. The last research that I saw, it's 14 or 17 touch points before someone makes a purchase or something in there. That depending on the price of the product and how considered the purchase is, that can take some time. When a customer has started that decision-making process for how they want to make a purchase, oftentimes I see it as this, emotional decision-making time where, it starts with an emotion of, I have a need. And that, that need might be something where, I ran out of a thing and I need to reorder. It might be that, I broke something, I need to replace it. It might be that I had a crappy day and now I want some, retail therapy. Then the rational side of it is, your price, feature, competition research. And again, like this is going to scale based on how considered the purchase it is. But that rational period is someone where they're really kind of looking at different things. And the emotional is the point of purchase. And that's oftentimes, you can sometimes, think about that as a nudge. And the nudge is going to be something that's very visceral. It can also be something that can be, put in place by a marketer. Effective marketing nudges are, shop abandonment, emails, or things like that, where it's a highly personal piece of information that's put out to the customer. It could also be driven from the customer's point of view, where that concept of I need retail therapy. I've been wanting this thing, and I finally got my bonus at work, or whatever those life moments are that help drive someone to make the purchase. But that process. I think is that process definitely comes from a B2C concept, but with B2B, I think it is going to be somewhat similar depending on the merchant and where who the buyer is at that point in time.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Keith. This great conversation about B2C strategies for B2B. I feel like I learned a lot. Now I would like to talk through a few of your incredible projects, right? Let's talk about some of the examples in real life. You help so many different companies create winning e-commerce websites. I'd love to dig into a few projects that you and your team have worked on, 3 to be exact. To start, I do want to highlight Theo Chocolate and US Cutter, both great examples of brands who are doing both B2B and B2C on BigCommerce. How'd you work with them to connect their updated, branding across the entire website experience? For example, wholesale, direct to consumer, etc.
Yeah, what's interesting is that 2 very different categories and even size of businesses with e-commerce, but still having similar needs from their customer base. So in the Theo world, wholesale might be, chefs or restaurants or bakeries needing chocolate. In the world of US Cutter, they sell high-end printers and vinyl cutters, and then there's a large line of consumable products that go with it. On the US Cutter side, the consumables or the folks buy the printer or the cutter, and then they need all the material to go into it. So like they're a good example around how that consumable nature of the products that they're purchasing can drive repurchase. Also, customer groups and price lists and things like that to help with B2B. Avalara actually also has an interesting product called Cert Capture, which helps automate tax exemption paperwork. So I think that there's them along with other folks have a lot of tools out there which can help automate some of the B2B specific business needs. On the Theo side, it's similar functionality, even though it is a different audience. And so I think that it's kind of a good example of how, BigCommerce can serve, both customers within the single platform. And then on the implementation side, we're able to customize, templates and we're able to customize templates and the customer experience to match whatever the end customer needs, B2B or B2C.
Yeah, two great examples with similar stories, but completely different, use cases as well, right? I do want to dig into one of my favorites, Allure Bridals. This one, to my understanding, it's a little more complex, right? I would love for you to walk me through creating their B2B store and how the brand is creating a digital presence to reach their customer base.
Yeah, so Allure is kind of next level B2B in a lot of cases because when you're shopping for a wedding dress, that it's really wrapped around a date, and and even though your customer, your end customer, the bride, is going to be likely working with a bridal retailer, the availability of that particular dress at that point in time for the wedding date or the need by date, which might include hemming or other alterations afterwards, is finite. You can't be late.
No, absolutely not.
Dress can't be late for the wedding. So how they manage their supply chain, down to individual units is really complex. And the B2B side has to display that inventory by date information in a way that is easy for a retailer to understand, and then also help guide their end customer, the bride, about which dress, which size, color, and availability for that information. So you kind of layer on the multifaceted inventory quantities with data in there, but also with this information happening, or with the inventory information is multifaceted because you have data in there, but then also that we're shopping for an event that might be 6 or 7 months out. That drives their overall demand for how they're scheduling manufacturing.
Yeah, it really does blow my mind how you really have to think through all those components, right? And bridal, that industry, I'm sure, is a very complex one when talking about inventory. One of the pieces of the Allure site that I just think is amazing is the ability to customize a wedding gown. It's one of those situations I wish I was able to do that, when I got married. It's an ability now that's a little expected. The functionality right there for a lot of bridal customers. If you don't mind walking us through how you're able to leverage BigCommerce to meet and even exceed those expectations.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about custom products for Allure is that the same functionality is also being used for US Cutter and others. And so really the concept around price modifiers combined with custom fields, allows us to store, a lot of data against the product record. And then when we go build the front end experience, we can leverage that, into whatever experience we need to create. So, in both cases, you have ERP systems that are feeding, a lot of data into BigCommerce via the APIs, and we're storing it appropriately in various places. And then you're able to craft the customer experience accordingly. So I think that where, the win for BigCommerce is that, we have the ability to have this data storage, and then also the price modifiers allows us to, set this criteria in the product record, and then BigCommerce can then leverage that for checkout as well as promotions and price list and, and all the functionality that goes along with it.
Well, Keith, thank you so much for everything. I think this concludes our session. If there's one takeaway from the session for our listeners, what would it be?
Understand your customer. Yeah, is that especially if you're trying to do B2B and B2C on the same site, totally doable from a technology standpoint. And oftentimes the technology is the easier part. Having a keen understanding for who your customer is, how you want to communicate to them, and what is really important to them is how we build the appropriate customer experience and also technology stack to service that customer. Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot. I mean, it's great. It's great advice. Everyone should know their customer first and foremost, right? If our listeners want to connect with you after this, where can they find you?
Shoot me an email, keith@overdose.digital.
Great. Thank you so much. It was wonderful chatting with you today, Keith. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you tuning in, please check out our other Make It Big sessions and share what you learned on social using the hashtag MakeItBigComp.
Thank you.
Thank you.